It was my luck that during my first month as a permanent hire at Vanguard Media, the founder's son returned from his years abroad and took over the entire executive suite. And it was my even worse luck that the man in question happened to be Damian Wright, my ex-boyfriend's former college roommate. I hadn't seen him in 6 years. Back in school, Damian had been the quiet, impenetrable presence in the back of the room. Now, clad in a razor-sharp charcoal suit, he radiated an icy, imposing authority that made everyone in the room instinctively pull back. At that moment, his dark eyes were locked on me, narrowed in unadulterated disgust. Who approved hiring someone of such bottom-tier morality and wretched character? His voice cut through the open floor, deep and merciless. The bustling floor dropped into a dead silence. Dozens of eyes snapped toward me, wide with gossip and morbid curiosity. My face burned as if he had slapped me across the cheek in front of the entire company. "Mr. Wright, I personally headhunted Nora." Evelyn spoke up, her voice steady as she stepped beside me. She was the senior vice president and my mentor, a woman I'd known and respected for 3 years. Her professional credentials are ironclad, and her reputation in the industry speaks for itself. 6 months ago, I was a vice president at another firm, but internal politics had pushed me into a corner. Evelyn stepped in, offered me a generous salary and a department director role, and pulled me out of that sinkhole. And now she was still standing by my side. "Mr. Wright, I think you might have a personal misunderstanding regarding Nora," Evelyn continued smoothly. "I brought her on board strictly based on merit. Before this, she reached an executive level at a remarkably young age and successfully spearheaded multiple 8-figure campaigns. Her expertise is top tier. I trust my judgment, and I trust her ability." Damian didn't look at Evelyn. His eyes remained pinned on me, the hatred behind them naked and raw. "Ability?" Damian let out a cold, sharp breath. "Can talent wash away a rotten character?" Evelyn frowned, opening her mouth to push back, but I gently touched her arm to stop her. It wasn't that I didn't want to defend myself, I just knew it was useless. Damian's contempt for me was deep-seated and years in the making. And frankly, he wasn't wrong. In his eyes, I was a woman of wretched character. During our college years, I had deliberately inserted myself into a relationship, tearing his roommate Aaron Cole away from his girlfriend, Fiona Reed. I had been ruthless, scheming, and relentless until I dragged Aaron away from her. Then, after 6 months of dating Aaron, I subjected him to months of cold psychological distance, until he was broken enough to break up with me and flee the country. If Fiona and Aaron had every right to hate me, Damian's feeling toward me was pure, unfiltered revulsion. Seeing him again today, I couldn't blame him for his words. If a close friend of mine had been manipulated by a toxic ex and driven to the brink of despair, I would probably want to strangle that person on sight too. Damian was just well-mannered enough to restrict his vengeance to a verbal execution rather than a physical strike. Still, standing there under the suffocating weight of his glare, staying completely silent made me look guilty. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to remain even. "Mr. Wright, your impression of me seems locked in the past. People change. I've grown up a lot since then." He let out a short, mocking laugh. "A leopard doesn't change its spots, Nora. A rotten core stays rotten." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers in the cubicles. My fingertips trembled, but I forced the corners of my mouth upward, plastering on a polished, corporate smile. "You've only just arrived, Mr. Wright, and we haven't worked together yet. Once you see my work, you might realize I'm not the person you remember." He didn't hesitate for a single second. He stepped right past me, his shoulder almost brushing mine. "There's no need," he said coldly. "I have zero interest in getting to know someone like you." The rhythmic, heavy clicking of his leather shoes echoed against the marble floor, unhurried, aloof, supreme. He left me standing in the center of the hallway, exposed to dozens of staring eyes. Some held pity, some held curiosity, and others were bright with schadenfreude. From a corner cubicle, I caught a hushed whisper. What on earth did she do to make the new boss hate her that much? Who knows? But she didn't even deny it. That means it's all true. I stood anchored to the spot, holding that perfect, professional smile until Damian's tall silhouette vanished down the executive corridor. Only then did the crowd slowly disperse. Evelyn pulled me into a vacant conference room and clicked the door shut. "You know Damian, right?" she asked, leaning against the glass table. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the wall. "We went to the same university. We have a history." Evelyn didn't press for details. She simply reached out and patted my shoulder warmly. "Whatever happened back then, don't let it get to you. I've worked with you for 3 years. I know who you are, both in your work and as a person." Her words almost cracked the armor I was desperately holding together. "Thank you, Evelyn." "Don't mention it." Damian spent years abroad, picking up that blunt, arrogant attitude where he says whatever pops into his head. "Don't take it to heart." I nodded slowly. "I won't. Thanks again." "All right, get back to work. If he gives you a hard time again, come straight to me." I walked back down to my department's floor. The moment I pushed through the glass doors, A dozen employees snapped their heads up toward me, only to instantly drop their gazes back to their monitors, pretending to be frantically busy. Keyboards clattered, files shuffled. I knew they had been talking about me a second before I walked in. I pretended not to notice. I walked straight past the rows of cubicles into my corner office and pulled the door shut behind me. The moment the latch clicked, every ounce of my composure drained away. My hands began to shake, not a slight tremor, but a violent, uncontrollable spasm. My knuckles turned white, my fingers stiffening into claws. Cold sweat broke out across my forehead and trickled down my temple. My chest felt squeezed by an invisible fist, wringing the air out of my lungs in agonizing pulses. I collapsed into my desk chair, my trembling hands scrambling to pull open the bottom drawer. I missed the handle on the first try because my hands were shaking too hard. On the second try, I yanked it open, fumbled for the small white prescription bottle, twisted the cap off, and threw 2 pills into my mouth, swallowing them dry. The bitter, chalky taste coated my throat. I tilted my head back against the leather headrest, closing my eyes, waiting for the chemical calm to hit my bloodstream. 2 or 3 minutes passed. My racing pulse gradually slowed down. The tremors in my hands subsided into a dull, manageable ache. I opened my eyes, staring blankly at the harsh white fluorescent light on the ceiling, letting out a long, shaky breath. My depression was flaring up again. Whatever, I thought, staring at the ceiling. It is what it is. I bent down, gathered the scattered items from the desk, tossed them into the drawer, and slid it shut. Then I booted up my laptop and pulled up my pending files. No matter what the new owner thought of me, the work still needed to get done. I was just another corporate mercenary trading hours for a paycheck. I didn't have the luxury of being fragile. The weeks that followed played out exactly as I anticipated. An uphill battle through wet cement. The first time I went to present a quarterly strategy to Damian, I prepared every piece of data meticulously. I built a comprehensive slide deck, printed financial reports, and arrived at his office 10 minutes early. Damian walked in precisely on the hour. He passed right by me without so much as a glance from the corner of his eye. During my 30-minute presentation, he never raised his head once. His gaze stayed glued to the screen of his personal laptop. When I finished and asked for his feedback, he gave a flat, indifferent noted, closed his laptop, and walked out of the room. He treated me like ghost. Before long, Damian brought the hammer down on me during a middle management meeting in front of 15 department heads. Certain departments show numbers that look decent on paper, he said, flicking lazily through my report, his tone dry and dismissive. But when you compare their actual growth rate against the industry baseline, it's mediocre at best. He paused, resting his chin on his hand. Of course, making numbers look pretty on a page is a skill in itself. Whether it's real capability, I'll leave that unsaid. Every eye in the room shifted to me. That quarter, my department's growth rate ranked second in the entire company, right behind sales. My team and I had worked 80-hour weeks to pull those numbers off. He hadn't even looked at the methodology before dismissing it as fluff. I gripped my pen until my knuckles turned white, keeping my face completely blank. Later, the company launched a flagship multi-million-dollar project. By all standard operational procedures, the market research and strategic planning should have been spearheaded by my team. Yet when the project task force was announced, my name was nowhere on the roster. Evelyn pulled me into her office privately afterward, her brows knit in frustration. I brought it up with Damian directly. I told him your team was the best fit for this. He told me he needed to reevaluate your core competencies and sidelined you for now. I offered a small, quiet smile. It's fine, Evelyn. I understand. What was there to understand? I understood that he was using his executive power to systematically freeze me out over a personal vendetta. But what could I do? He was the owner. I was an employee. If he fired me outright without cause, I could claim a massive severance package. So instead, he was choosing to bleed me out slowly, suffocating my position until I snapped and walked away. That was his game. And after 3 months of enduring his slow execution, I finally hit my limit. It wasn't because of my own pride. It was because of my team. Being kept off core projects meant my team had no high-impact work. No high-impact work meant no performance bonuses. The young managers under me had signed up to work with me so we could hit targets and earn real money, not to sit on the bench and starve because of my past. That afternoon, I knocked on Damian's office door. He sat behind a massive mahogany desk, wire-rimmed glasses resting on his straight nose, his long fingers turning the page of a document. When I walked in, his expression didn't shift by a millimeter. He didn't even adjust his posture. Mr. Wright, I'm here to present the Q3 performance review for my department. Leave it on the desk. I walked over and placed the leather-bound report on the polished wood. He didn't touch it, nor did he offer me a seat. I stood, he sat. Silence stretched thin and suffocating between us. After 3 agonizing minutes, he finally spoke. But it had nothing to do with the report. Nora, he said, leaning back against his leather chair, his gaze finally sweeping over me with cold, superior scrutiny. Have you ever considered that you might simply not be a good fit for this company? I paused. Excuse me. You have technical competence, I won't deny that, he said evenly. But surviving in a corporate environment requires more than raw talent. Integrity, ethics, professional standards. Sometimes those things matter far more than results. I knew he was still clinging to the ghost of 6 years ago. Mr. Wright. I kept my voice perfectly composed. Are you implying that I should resign? He didn't answer. He just watched me. That look was painfully familiar. It was the exact same expression he wore 6 years ago. Contempt, disgust, and absolute moral superiority. I took a deep, steadying breath. Mr. Wright, I haven't committed any professional infractions, so I won't be resigning voluntarily. My probation period ended months ago, and I hold a valid 3-year contract. If you wish to terminate my employment, I expect full severance in accordance with labor laws. His brows narrowed slightly. You're demanding severance? Absolutely. I met his cold gaze head-on. Under current labor regulations, an unscheduled termination without cause after 6 months of employment requires a double severance payout based on my tenure, plus my contractually guaranteed annual performance bonus. In total, that comes to roughly 18 months of my base salary. If you find those terms acceptable, I can sign the separation agreement today. Damian stared at me for several long seconds, then let out a cold, sharp sneer. Fine. I'll pay it. Just get out of my company. We have no room for people with broken moral compasses. I nodded calmly. Understood. Please inform HR and payroll to process the wire. I had no desire to linger. I turned to grab the door handle, but his voice halted me from behind. Nora, try fixing your nature. Otherwise, no man will ever truly want a woman like you. I paused, turning my head back with a dry, bitter smirk. I wouldn't be so sure about that, Mr. Wright. After all, there's always someone blind enough. Like, for instance, the man who had sent me a ridiculously thirsty message just a few nights ago. Baby, why haven't you been replying to my texts lately? Are you so busy you forgot about me, or do you not love me anymore? Followed immediately by another notification. A semi-blurry, dimly lit mirror selfie. The man in the photo wasn't wearing a jacket. His tailored shirt had the top 2 buttons undone, the collar falling open to reveal the sharp, sculpted line of his collarbones and the faint, defined ridges of his abs below. It was dangerously alluring. You used to tell me how much you loved my abs. I just finished up at work and took this for you. Are they more defined than last time? I'm free this weekend. Can we finally meet? I want to let you look at them. Up close. If I hadn't recognized the precise pattern of the custom-wood blinds in the background, I might have been thrilled. Unfortunately for him, that photo had been taken right in this very executive office. The familiar mahogany paneling, the distinctive blinds, and that slate gray silk shirt, which I had personally picked out and ordered for him online weeks ago. The man I was dating online was Damian Wright. I had discovered the truth at the beginning of the month. At the time, Damian was acting cold and untouchable at work. I had needed his formal approval on an operational budget, so I asked Evelyn to share his personal messaging contact with me. The moment I pulled up his profile, I froze. The display name, the minimalist avatar, the header photo of a quiet coastline. They were identical down to the pixel to the profile of my online boyfriend of 4 months. I knew the world was full of wild coincidences, so I didn't believe it at first. I began testing my hypothesis in subtle ways. I would ask my online boyfriend to describe what he was doing, what he was eating, or what shirt he was wearing at that exact moment. During grueling company-wide meetings, while Damian sat at the head of the table looking like an unapproachable tyrant, I would send a sweet, needy text to my online account under the table, and watch him lower his head, his cold lips curving into a soft, secret smile as his thumb flew across his screen. And right after he tore me apart in that middle management meeting, I sent my online boyfriend a text. Is there anyone you really hate right now? He replied almost instantly, yes. Someone with a terrible character. I just had to put her in her place. My stomach had twisted into a tight knot. Do you think people can change? What if someone made mistakes in the past, but genuinely grew up? His response came without a second of hesitation. A leopard doesn't change its spots. People who do bad things are rotten to the core. They never change. Those few sentences had felt like cold needles pressing into my skin. That was the moment the final piece clicked into place. Damian Wright was my sweet, devoted online boyfriend. I had never imagined that the tender, attentive man on the other side of the screen, the one who catered to my every mood, was the exact same man who treated me like filth in real life and called me wretched. After the initial shock wore off, a dark, absurd wave of resentment began to bloom inside me. What would happen if Damian found out that the woman he whispered sweet nothings to every single night was the very woman he despised? Rage, shame, utter humiliation? For a brief moment, I wanted to play the long game. I wanted to make him fall so deeply, hopelessly in love with my online persona that when I finally stripped away the mask, it would shatter his superior little world into pieces. I wanted him to taste what it felt like to be pulled up into the clouds only to be dropped into the mud. But then I took a breath, and the urge faded. When I interfered in Aaron and Fiona's relationship years ago, I had my own desperate, painful reasons. But at the end of the day, it was still a toxic, destructive spiral. I didn't want to live my life stuck in that cycle forever. Damian hated me, and he had pushed me out of my job. It was unfair, but it wasn't worth burning down my own peace to ruin him. Besides, during those months online, his gentleness toward me had been real. His warmth had kept me grounded on nights when my depression tried to swallow me whole. I didn't want to tarnish that small memory with an ugly game of revenge. Let it go, I told myself. Damian, you should be glad I'm letting you off the hook. Walking out of Damian's corner office, I pulled out my phone, logged into my secondary account, and typed out a final message. Let's skip meeting up this weekend. Honestly, I don't think our values align after all. We should break up. I hope you find someone who suits you better. No long explanations, no dramatic reveals. Just a clean, ordinary end to an ordinary internet romance. The moment the status shifted to sent, I logged out of the burner account, deleted the app, and pushed open the doors to the Human Resources Department. It was time to sign my papers. From this point on, Nora Hayes and Damian Wright were even. In reality and online, HR had clearly received direct orders from Damian. They didn't hassle me, expediting the offboarding process immediately. On the official record, it was logged as a voluntary resignation on my part, but behind closed doors, every penny of the 18-month severance package was calculated according to labor law and wired to my account. I had to admit, as much as Damian despised me, his moral perfectionism prevented him from cheating me out of what I was legally owed. I was required to stay for 2 final transition days to hand over my projects before the weekend. I accepted the terms quietly. During those 2 days, Evelyn was livid on my behalf, threatening multiple times to storm into Damian's office to demand an explanation, but I held her back every time. She was consumed with guilt, feeling that pulling me over to Vanguard had exposed me to this nightmare. Evelyn, this has nothing to do with you. I reassured her gently as we packed up my desk files. It's personal history. Don't beat yourself up. Besides, I've been working nonstop for years. Taking a break to go home and rest sounds pretty good right now. She sighed, giving my shoulder an affectionate squeeze. Fine. But the moment you're ready to get back into the field, tell me. I'll keep my eyes open for the right executive opening. I will. Thank you for everything. Over those next 48 hours, I kept my head down, organizing handover documents and finalizing client lists. Because of the transition details, I had to step into Damian's office a few more times. Every time I walked in, the tension in the room was suffocating. He was in an abyssal mood, irritable, dark, his brow permanently furrowed in frustration. His eyes kept darting back to his personal phone resting on the leather blotter. Whenever the screen lit up with a notification, he grabbed it instantly, only for his face to fall into a deeper, hollow shadow when it wasn't the message he was waiting for. I knew why. Since I had sent that breakup text and uninstalled the app, he had been shouting into a void. He couldn't reach me, and it was driving him out of his mind. By Friday afternoon, the paperwork was complete. Holding a single cardboard box filled with my personal desk items, I walked out of the glass doors of Vanguard Media for the last time. On the subway ride home, I reinstalled the app and logged into the burner account one last time. Predictably, Damian's messages had piled up to over 100 notifications. My eyes drifted to the most recent one sent an hour ago. I never felt our values didn't align. You've always been the one person who truly understood me. Just tell me why. What did I do wrong? At least give me a reason. I stared at the glowing text for a long time. The train rattled along the tracks, announcements echoing through the carriage as passengers boarded and departed. Finally, I made a decision. I opened the camera, switched to the front-facing lens, and took a quiet, clear photo of my face. Then I hit send, adding a single message below it. You always wanted to meet me. This is me. And by the way, you were the one who said I had a bottom-tier moral compass and terrible character. So, do you still think our values align? Without waiting for a reply, I blocked his number, deleted the account, and uninstalled the app for good. The subway car rattled along the elevated tracks, slicing through the gray dusk of the city. I leaned my head against the scratched plastic window, watching the neon signs of high-rise office buildings blur into streaks of amber and crimson. My phone vibrated once in my palm. I looked down. The app was gone. The icon had vanished from my home screen, leaving an empty black square in its grid. The block was permanent, the account scrubbed down to the bare servers. For the first time in 6 months, the tightness in my chest eased. The invisible fist that had been wringing my lungs dry since Damian Wright stepped foot onto Vanguard's executive floor loosened its grip. I took a full, clean breath. It felt cool, tasting faintly of iron and rain. I had 18 months of base salary sitting in an untouched escrow account. I had a 3-bedroom apartment with a sunny balcony overlooking the botanical Gardens, 2 months of unread novels stacked on my nightstand, and a prescription for escitalopram that I intended to manage without the ambient terror of walking past the CEO's glass office every morning. I was free. At that exact moment, for miles away on the 42nd floor of Vanguard Tower, the silence in the executive office was absolute. Damian sat behind his desk. The room was lit only by the ambient blue wash of his laptop monitor and the city lights bleeding through the custom wood blinds. On his desk, his personal phone lay flat against the leather blotter. The screen was illuminated. In the center of the display was a photograph, a woman sitting in a crowded subway car, a woolen scarf wrapped loosely around her throat, dark hair framing, high cheekbones, eyes calm and unblinking, looking directly into the camera. Beneath the image, 2 lines of text hung like lead weights. You always wanted to meet me. This is me. And by the way, you were the one who said I had a bottom-tier moral compass and terrible character. So, do you still think our values align? Damian stared at the screen. For 5 seconds, his brain refused to process the pixels. The woman in the picture was Nora Hayes. The Nora Hayes who had handed him a pristine leather-bound Q3 report without a tremor in her hands. The Nora Hayes who had stood before the entire executive committee while he dismantled her professional reputation with surgical precision, her face a mask of polite, indifferent deference. The Nora Hayes who, at 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday 3 weeks ago, had texted him, "You're working too late again. Did you drink the chamomile tea I told you to order?" His hand reached out, his long fingers hovering over the glass. His thumb pressed the call button. A robotic tone answered immediately. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service or has restricted incoming calls." He tapped the messaging bar, typing with frantic speed. "Nora, wait. Look at me." A red exclamation point popped up beside the bubble. Message failed to send. "You are no longer connected with this user." Damian stood up so violently that his heavy leather chair slammed into the floor-to-ceiling glass wall behind him with a sharp, concussive crack. His breathing turned shallow and jagged. His heart hammered against his ribs. Like a trapped bird, he reached up, tearing at the knot of his silk tie, ripping the top 2 buttons of his shirt open as if he were suffocating. "No," he whispered into the empty room. "No, no, no." He grabbed his suit jacket, not bothering to put his arms through the sleeves, and bolted through the double mahogany doors. The executive floor was half empty. A few late-working analysts looked up in shock as the usually unflappable ICCO sprinted past their cubicles, his footsteps pounding against the hardwood floor. "Mr. Wright?" His executive assistant, Marcus, called out, clutching a stack of folders. "The Tokyo conference call starts in 10 minutes. Where is she?" Damian barked, his voice raw, stripped of every shred of corporate polish. Marcus blinked, bewildered. "Who?" "Nora Hayes. Where is she?" "She off-boarded at 4 o'clock, Mr. Wright. She signed the final release with legal and left the building over 30 minutes ago." Damian didn't wait for another word. He slammed his palm against the elevator call button, watching the numbers tick down with agonizing slowness. 40, 39, 38. "Fuck," he cursed under his breath, a word no one in Vanguard Media had ever heard cross his lips. He spun on his heel, kicked open the heavy fire door, and took the stairs down, 3 flights at a time. When he burst through the revolving glass doors into the ground floor lobby, the evening chill hit him like a physical blow. Rain had begun to fall, slicking the granite plaza into dark mirrors. Taxis splashed through puddles along the curb. Hundreds of commuters with black umbrellas moved in an endless, faceless swarm toward the subway entrance. Damian stood in the rain, his crisp white shirt soaking through, clinging to his broad shoulders. He turned in circles, scanning the sea of umbrellas, looking for a dark woolen coat, a familiar scarf, a face he had looked at every single day for 4 months without ever actually seeing. "Nora," he shouted into the noise of the traffic. A few pedestrians glanced at him, bewildered by the sight of a man in a bespoke suit standing bareheaded in the downpour, shouting at ghosts. There was no answer, only the hiss of tires on wet asphalt and the cold, indifferent rumble of the city. I spent the next 3 weeks learning how to sleep past 6 in the morning. It was harder than I expected. For 6 years, my internal clock had been calibrated to panic. I would wake at 5:45 a.m. with my heart racing, anticipating an urgent email from a client, an aggressive operational audit, or a cold, contemptuous glance from Damian across a polished conference table. Now my mornings were quiet. I bought a small French press and learned how to grind Ethiopian beans to the exact coarseness that produced no bitterness. I spent my afternoons sitting on my balcony, watching the autumn leaves turn amber across the canopy of the botanical gardens. I read essays on architecture. I watered my ferns. My therapist, Dr. Harrison, noted the difference during our Tuesday session. "You look grounded, Nora," she said, peering over her round spectacles. "You're Resting heart rate is down 12 beats. The tremors in your fingers, have they returned? Not once since the Friday I left, I said, cradling a mug of peppermint tea. The silence is expansive. And the guilt? Dr. Harrison asked gently. I looked at the oil painting on her office wall, a storm rolling over a desolate shoreline. The guilt belongs to the past. I paid my debt to Aaron 6 years ago. I paid it in full with my own reputation. If Damian wants to hold the receipt for a bill that wasn't his to collect, that's his burden to carry, not mine. And if he seeks you out? He won't, I said smoothly. Damian Wright is a man of immaculate pride. Believes in absolute moral binaries, good and evil, righteous and wretched. Finding out that his beloved online muse is the very woman he deemed rotten to the core won't make him love me. It will make him feel thoroughly disgusted with himself for being fooled. He will bury the memory to protect his own ego. Dr. Harrison smiled faintly. You understand human nature very well, Nora. But sometimes you overestimate how much control people have over their own hearts. When pride collides with grief. I didn't answer. I took a sip of my tea, watching the rain tap against the windowpane, convinced I was right. I was wrong. The first sign of the crack in Damian's world came through Evelyn. We met for brunch on a Sunday at a discreet bistro in the West Village. Evelyn looked exhausted. The dark circles beneath her eyes were only partially concealed by concealer, and she attacked her eggs Benedict with the nervous energy of someone surviving on caffeine and sheer willpower. He's lost his mind, Nora, Evelyn said, dropping her fork with a clatter. Completely and utterly lost it. I sliced a strawberry. Did the Tokyo merger fall through? The Tokyo merger went through without a hitch, Evelyn replied, leaning across the table. It's not the business. It's him. The Monday after you left, he fired the entire internal legal team that processed your severance. Then he had Marcus pull every single project file your department handled over the last 3 years, not just at Vanguard, but the archives from your previous agency. I paused, the knife hovering over my plate. Why? He's auditing everything, Evelyn whispered. He spent 3 days locked in his office with your financial models, your campaign strategies, and the performance reviews. When he finally came out, he called an emergency board meeting. Personally reinstated your Q3 growth numbers to the top tier, issued a formal apology to your former team on the company intranet, and gave every single manager under you a 20% retention bonus out of his personal executive pool. My chest tightened slightly, but my voice remained steady. He's just clearing his corporate conscience. Damian has an obsession with fairness on paper. Fairness? Evelyn let out a dry, incredulous laugh. Nora, the man looks like a walking corpse. He doesn't sleep. He sits in your old office on the 34th floor after hours. My assistant saw him there at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night, just sitting at your bare desk in the dark. I set my cutlery down, the appetite draining from me. Evelyn, please. I don't want to hear about him. Evelyn studied my face for a long moment, her gaze softening with genuine affection. She reached across the linen tablecloth and squeezed my hand. I know, she said quietly. I know he put you through hell. But there's one more thing you need to know. Damian went to Boston last weekend. My breath caught. Boston. He went to the coal estate, Evelyn said. He spent 4 hours with Aaron. 6 years ago, Boston was cold. I had just turned 22, working my first junior marketing job while taking evening classes for my master's degree. My younger sister, Maya, was 19, a sophomore at the New England Conservatory of Music, with talent that made her professors weep and an emotional fragility that made me terrified for her every waking hour. Then Maya met Aaron Cole. Aaron was handsome, wealthy, and heir to one of the most ruthless private equity dynasties in New England. But more than that, Aaron was drowning. His family had mapped out every breath of his life. The Harvard MBA, the corporate marriage to Fiona Reed, the daughter of a state senator, and the eventual inheritance of the family firm. Aaron didn't want any of it. He wanted to write plays in drafty lofts. When he met Maya at a campus recital, he latched onto her like a man dying of thirst. But Aaron was weak. He wanted the romance of rebellion without the courage to pay for it. He dated Maya in secret while maintaining his polished public engagement with Fiona. Fiona was not blind. When she discovered the affair, she didn't confront Aaron. She knew Aaron's family held the purse strings to her father's political campaigns. Instead, Fiona went after Maya. Fiona used her social leverage to systematically destroy Maya's life. She had Maya's conservatory scholarship revoked under false accusations of plagiarism. She leaked private, humiliating voice notes to the student body. She orchestrated a campaign of social isolation so vicious that Maya stopped eating, stopped playing the cello, and finally, on a freezing Tuesday in November, swallowed an entire bottle of sleeping pills in her dorm room. I was the one who found Maya on the bathroom floor. I was the one who pumped her chest until the paramedics arrived. While Maya lay in a coma in the ICU, Aaron stood in the hospital hallway, weeping, terrified that his father would find out he was at the bedside of a commoner's daughter. I can't leave Fiona, Aaron had sobbed, his face buried in his hands. If I break the engagement, my father will cut me off, and Fiona's father will destroy my family's holdings. Nora, please. What do I do? I'm going to kill myself. I can't live like this. I had looked at the boy, weak, cowardly, spineless, and then through the glass at my little sister hooked up to a mechanical ventilator. You want out? I had said, my voice cold enough to freeze blood. I'll get you out. I didn't care about Aaron's soul. I cared about Maya's life. If Aaron stayed in Boston, Fiona would finish what she started the moment Maya woke up. Aaron had to leave the country, and Fiona's engagement had to be shattered in a way that made Aaron look like the victim of a manipulative seductress rather than a traitor to his class. I became the monster. I inserted myself into Aaron's social circle with calculating precision. I wore the dresses that caught his eye. I showed up at the bars he frequented. I staged encounters where Fiona would see us together. I made sure every camera caught my hand on Aaron's lapel. I played the role of the vulgar, ambitious climber who stole the golden boy from his aristocratic fiancée. When Fiona blew up the engagement in a public fury, Aaron's father was so disgusted by his son's scandalous lapse in judgment that he banished Aaron to the London branch of the firm to avoid further embarrassment. Aaron was safe. Maya was safe. Fiona got to play the tragic, dignified victim. And I took the blame. I took the insults, the whispers, the doors slammed in my face. I took the reputation of a homewrecker and carried it out of Boston on a midnight bus to New York, never telling a living soul why I had done it. Damian Wright, Aaron's quiet, upright roommate, had watched the entire tragedy from the sidelines. He had seen his friend broken, weeping, and exiled. He had seen Fiona's tears. And he had seen me, standing in the center of the wreckage, with a blank, unreadable smile on my face. He had hated me with the pure, unblemished righteousness of a man who only saw the play, never the strings pulling the actors. On a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 1 month after my departure from Vanguard, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting a package. I walked to the door, looked through the peephole, and my breath stopped in my throat. Damian stood in the hallway. He was not wearing his razor-sharp charcoal suits. He wore an unbuttoned black woolen overcoat over a dark sweater. His hair was slightly disheveled and his face was drawn, his cheekbones sharper than I remembered, his dark eyes shadowed by profound exhaustion. He didn't look imposing. He looked like a man who had walked 20 miles through a wasteland just to find an open door. I didn't open the latch. I stood on my side of the solid oak door, my hand resting against the wood. Go away, Mr. Wright, I said, my voice muffled by the panel. There was a long silence on the other side. Then a low, ragged sound escaped. Him, half a sigh, half a broken laugh. You recognized my footsteps, he said softly, even through the door. I recognized your silhouette through the peephole. I replied coldly. You shouldn't be here. We have nothing to discuss. The severance was paid, the transition was completed, and our business is concluded. Nora. The way he said my name was different. It wasn't the sharp, dismissive snap from the boardroom. It was the tone from the voice notes, the deep, intimate murmur that used to vibrate through my headphones at 1 a.m. when he thought I was a stranger 3,000 miles away. Aaron told me everything, Damian said. My heart gave a heavy, painful thud against my ribs. I closed my eyes, leaning my forehead against the cool paint of the door. He told me about Maya, Damian continued, his voice trembling slightly. He told me about the ICU, about Fiona's threats, about how he begged you on his knees to give him an excuse to leave the country because he was too cowardly to stand up to his father. I didn't speak. The memories rushed back, the smell of antiseptic in the Boston hospital, the sound of Maya's shallow breathing, the cold rain on the night I packed my single suitcase. For 6 years, Damian whispered, his forehead resting against the outside of the door right opposite mine. I thought you were a parasite who ruined a good man for sport. I built an entire moral universe around how much I hated you. And now you know, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, icy, impenetrable. Your friend was weak, your moral universe was built on a lie, and you spent 3 months abusing your executive power to torment an employee who did nothing to you. Yes, he said without hesitation. Every word of that is true. Then we're done, I said. You have your truth. You can go back to your tower and live with it. Nora, please. Open the door. Just let me look at you once. As yourself. No. Why? Because the woman you loved online was an illusion, Damian. I said the words, cutting through the wood between us. She was a safe space you created for yourself because you were lonely in a corporate world you couldn't control. And the woman you hated in your office was also an illusion, a villain you created to justify your own cruelty. You have never seen the real me, and I have no desire to show her to you. Silence fell over the corridor. I stood there for 5 minutes, listening to the faint, steady sound of his breathing. Then slowly, the rustle of his coat signaled his movement. His footsteps moved down the carpeted hall, unhurried, heavy, and receded into the elevator bank. Only when the chime of the elevator echoed through the floor did my knees finally give out. I slid down against the door, burying my face in my hands, letting the tears fall in the quiet safety of my empty apartment. 2 weeks after Damian came to my apartment, the industry shifted on its axis. The news broke on the front page of the Financial Chronicle. Apex Holdings launches hostile takeover bid for Vanguard Media. Apex Holdings was the private investment vehicle of the Reid family. Senator Reid, Fiona's father, had spent the last decade expanding his financial empire into digital infrastructure. With Vanguard's founder, Damian's father, hospitalized following a sudden stroke in Zurich, Apex had quietly bought up 15% of Vanguard's floating public shares and allied with 3 minority board members to force a vote of no confidence against Damian. The architect of the takeover was none other than Fiona Reid. I was sitting in a cafe near the library when I saw the press release. Fiona was photographed standing on the steps of the stock exchange, clad in an ivory Dior suit, smiling with the predatory grace of an heiress who had waited 6 years to settle an old score. Her opening statement to the press was venom wrapped in velvet. Vanguard Media has suffered from erratic leadership and catastrophic human capital management over the last 2 quarters. Under current management, talent is purged over personal vendettas and core profitability has stalled. It is time for disciplined, ethical governance. She was using my departure as leverage. The whispers in the industry had already begun. Articles and trade blogs were questioning why Vanguard's top-performing department director had been abruptly terminated with a double severance payout right before a major product launch. The narrative was clear. Damian Wright was an unstable tyrant who ran a multi-million-dollar legacy firm like a personal playground. My phone rang 20 minutes later. It was Evelyn. Nora. Evelyn's voice was tense, background noise suggesting she was in a moving car. Have you seen the news? I'm reading the Chronicle right now, I said. Fiona has called a special shareholder meeting for next Friday, Evelyn said. She's submitting a motion to remove Damian as CEO. If she gets the institutional votes, she'll gut Vanguard, merge our digital assets into Apex, and fire every executive who supported Damian's father. Including you, I noted. Including me. But Nora, that's not why I'm calling. Evelyn hesitated, taking a breath. Fiona's legal team reached out to you, didn't they? I looked down at the screen of my tablet. A new email had landed in my inbox 10 minutes ago from Reid and Associates legal partners. They just did, I said. They want you to testify, Evelyn said grimly. They want you to sign an affidavit stating that Damian created a hostile work environment, retaliated against you without cause, and used corporate funds to pay off personal grievances. If you sign that paper, Fiona has the smoking gun she needs to strip Damian of his voting shares permanently. I stared out the cafe window at the gray clouds gathering over the avenue. What did Damian say? I asked. Evelyn let out a bitter sigh. Damian told the board that if you sign the affidavit, he will not dispute a single word of it. He told legal that every claim you make regarding his conduct will be accepted into the record without cross-examination. My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. He's throwing the fight. He's not throwing the fight against Fiona, Evelyn said. He's refusing to fight you. He told Marcus. I stole her career once. I won't drag her through the mud to save mine. Nora. The man is ready to let them tear Vanguard apart, rather than speak a word against you. The grand boardroom on the 50th floor of the St. Regis Hotel smelled of polished walnut, fresh lilies, and impending bloodshed. The long conference table was flanked on one side by the Vanguard board of directors and Damian's legal team. On the other side sat Fiona Reid, flanked by 4 senior partners from Manhattan's most ruthless corporate litigation firm. Damian sat at the head of the table. He was back in his charcoal suit, but the difference was striking. He had lost weight. His collarbones were sharp beneath his tailored shirt, his skin pale, his jaw set in a rigid, frozen line. He didn't look at Fiona. He didn't look at the board members who were already avoiding his gaze, calculating their exit strategies. The evidence of administrative malpractice is overwhelming, Fiona said, her voice smooth, melodic, carrying the effortless entitlement of old money. She gestured to a leather-bound dossier resting before each director. Mr. Wright's tenure has been characterized by emotional volatility and targeted retaliation against high-performing female executives. The case of Nora Hayes is merely the most egregious example. Fiona smiled, a small, triumphant curve of her red lips. We have prepared a formal declaration of hostile termination. Ms. Hayes has been invited to deliver her deposition in person today to finalize the record. If the board refuses to act on this testimony, Apex Holdings will file a federal shareholder derivative suit by 4 p.m. The lead director, an elderly banker named Harrison Vance, cleared his throat. Nervously, Mr. Wright, does the executive suite have a rebuttal before we admit the witness? Damian did not raise his head. His hands were clasped loosely on the table. No, Damian said, his voice flat, quiet, and devoid of inflection. If Miss Hayes has prepared a statement, the board should hear it without interference. Damian, you're signing your own execution, his chief counsel hissed under his breath. Damian didn't even blink. Let her speak. The double doors at the back of the boardroom clicked open. Every head turned. I walked in. I was wearing a tailored navy suit, the one I had bought with my first performance bonus at Vanguard. My hair was pulled back into a sleek low chignon. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor with a steady, rhythmic cadence. I held a slim leather portfolio under my left arm. Fiona's eyes sparkled with victory as I approached the table. She gave me a small, conspiratorial nod, the look of a queen welcoming a useful mercenary to the execution of a common enemy. Damian did not look up until my shadow fell across the mahogany table in front of him. When his eyes finally met mine, there was no defense in them. No anger. No arrogance. Only an ocean of sorrow, quiet and deep, waiting for the final blow. I stood at the foot of the table, opened my portfolio, and laid 3 separate documents onto the glass center console. Members of the board, I began, my voice carrying clearly to every corner of the room, crisp and completely steady. Before you enter any testimony regarding my departure from Vanguard Media, there are 3 primary records you must review. Fiona's brow furrowed slightly. Miss Hayes, the affidavit prepared by our counsel is on page 12. I am not referring to your affidavit, Miss Reed. I interrupted smoothly, not sparing her a single glance. I am referring to the forensic audit of Apex Holdings' digital acquisitions between 2021 and 2024. The room went dead silent. I tapped the first document. Exhibit A comprehensive trace of the 18 shell companies utilized by Senator Reed's PAC to short Vanguard stock 3 weeks prior to the public announcement of Mr. Wright Sr.'s illness. This constitutes direct insider trading under Section 10B of the Securities Exchange Act. Fiona's face went rigid. What is the meaning of this? Harrison, stop her. Exhibit B, I continued, raising my voice by half a decibel, cutting through Fiona's protest like a scalpel. The digital footprint of the private intelligence firm hired by Apex to compromise the medical records of Vanguard's founder from the Zurich clinic. The IP addresses map directly to the home office of Fiona Reed's personal chief of staff. 2 of the board members sat up straight, their faces draining of color. I turned my gaze slowly, deliberately, until it rested directly on Fiona Reed's widening eyes. And Exhibit C, I said softly. The complete psychiatric and legal records from the New England Conservatory regarding the targeted harassment of Maya Hayes 6 years ago, including the audio recordings where Miss Reed explicitly threatened to destroy a student's family if her fiancé's financial misconduct was exposed. Fiona shot to her feet, her chair shrieking against the floor. This is irrelevant. This is a personal vendetta. You are here to testify about Damian Wright's misconduct. I am testifying about character, Miss Reed, I said, my voice dropping into that low, lethal calm that had won me $50 million accounts before I turned 28. And as someone who has witnessed your character for 6 years, I can assure this board of one immutable fact. Damian Wright's only mistake as CEO was trusting that people who wear bespoke suits and carry family crests are capable of basic human decency. I looked down at the board of directors. My departure from Vanguard was a negotiated separation under mutually agreed terms. I received full statutory severance, my team was protected, and my operational models were implemented in full. There was no harassment. There was no breach of fiduciary duty. If Apex Holdings files a derivative suit today, I will personally submit these forensic audits to the Southern District of New York as a hostile witness for the defense. I closed my portfolio with a clean, sharp snap. Good afternoon, gentlemen. I turned on my heel and walked toward the double doors. Behind me, the boardroom exploded into absolute pandemonium. Board members were shouting, lawyers were scrambling for phones, Fiona's shrill, furious voice was cutting through the noise like broken glass. I didn't look back. I pushed through the heavy doors and stepped out into the quiet marble corridor of the hotel. I didn't take the elevator. I walked down the grand mezzanine stairs, pushing through the hotel's brass revolving doors into the cool afternoon air. It had begun to drizzle, a soft, gray mist that settled over the city like a veil. I stood under the hotel canopy, pulling my coat around me, waiting for the doorman to hail a cab. The fire doors behind me crashed open. Footsteps, fast, heavy, desperate, echoed across the wet granite. Nora. I stopped. I didn't turn around, but I didn't walk away. Damian caught up to me at the edge of the awning, where the rain met the stone. He was breathing heavily, his tie completely gone, his jacket damp from the mist. He stopped 3 feet away, his chest heaving, his hands hovering in the air as if he wanted to reach for me, but was terrified that touching me would turn me to smoke. Why? He asked. The word was ripped from his throat, raw and bleeding. Why did you do that? After everything I did to you, after how I treated you in that office. You could have destroyed me today. You had every right to watch me burn. I looked at him through the gray light. The rain caught in his dark hair, droplets glistening on his long lashes. The arrogance was gone. The moral perfectionism was gone. Standing before me was simply a man, flawed, broken, stripped of every illusion he had ever hid behind. I didn't do it for you, Damian, I said softly. A flicker of pain crossed his features, but he nodded, accepting the blow. No. I did it for Maya, I said. I did it because 6 years ago, I had to be a monster to protect someone I loved. And I spent 6 years letting people like Fiona and you believe I was rotten because it was easier than fighting a world that prefers pretty lies to ugly truths. I stepped out from under the canopy, letting the cool mist touch my face. Today I stopped hiding, I said. I didn't save Vanguard for your sake. I saved it because the work I did there was mine. The growth numbers were mine. The strategy was mine. And I'll be damned if I let Fiona Reed use my name as a weapon to tear down something I built with my own hands. Damian took a step forward, stepping into the rain with me. He didn't care about the water soaking his clothes. His dark eyes were locked onto mine with an intensity so fierce, so painfully honest, that it made my breath catch. And us, he whispered. The 4 months on that screen, the messages, the voice notes. Was all of that just a strategy, Nora? I looked away, toward the line of yellow cabs idling along the avenue. I was lonely, Damian, I admitted quietly. My depression was getting worse. Every day at work felt like walking into an execution chamber. And every night, there was this man who didn't know who I was, who didn't judge me, who told me I was capable of being loved. A single tear cut through the rain on his cheek. It was real for me, he said, his voice breaking. Every single word. I fell in love with your mind before I ever knew your name. And when I found out, when I realized that the person who saved my soul at night was the person I was torturing by day, I wanted to rip my own heart out. He dropped to one knee on the wet granite. Pedestrians stopped under their umbrellas, staring in shock at the CEO of Vanguard Media kneeling in the rain in front of the St. Regis. Damian didn't see them. He looked up at me, his hands resting flat against his thighs, completely defenseless. I don't ask you to forgive me, Damian said, each word steady and heavy with absolute surrender. I don't ask you to come back to Vanguard. I don't even ask you to unblock my number. But if it takes the rest of my life, Nora, let me earn the right to stand in your presence without being your executioner. I looked down at him. The wind lifted the hem of my coat. The city noise seemed to fade into a distant murmur, leaving only the sound of rain falling on granite. I felt the old scar in my chest, the deep cold ache that had lived there since Boston. For the first time in 6 years, it didn't hurt. It was just a mark on my skin, proof that I had survived the winter. I reached out my hand. I didn't pull him up into an embrace. I didn't offer a promise of romance or an easy absolution. I simply offered my open palm, fingers relaxed, letting the rain pool in the center of my hand. Stand up, Mr. Wright, I said, a faint, genuine smile touching the corners of my lips for the first time. You're ruining a very expensive pair of trousers. Damian looked at my hand. Slowly, with an almost reverent hesitation, he reached up and placed his fingers against mine. His skin was cold from the rain, but his grip was firm, warm beneath the surface, grounding. He stood up, towering over me once again, but his eyes were level with mine, no longer looking down from a moral pedestal, but looking across, seeing me whole. Where are you going now? He asked softly. Home, I said, gently pulling my hand back from his grip, though I didn't step away. I have a book to finish. And tomorrow, I'm registering my own independent consulting firm. Damian's eyes lit up with a spark of genuine admiration. Will your firm accept Vanguard as its first client? I tilted my head, looking him up and down with the sharp, professional scrutiny of an executive who knew her own worth down to the penny. My rates are triple what they used to be, Mr. Wright, I said coolly. And my moral compass requires that all clients demonstrate exceptional character before I accept their retainers. A slow, breathtaking smile broke across Damian's face, the first real smile I had ever seen on his lips in real life, identical to the warmth that used to radiate through the screen in the dead of night. I'll submit my credentials for your review tomorrow morning, Miss Hayes, he said softly. I promise. I'll do everything I can to meet your standards. We'll see, I said, turning toward the yellow cab that had finally pulled up to the curb. I opened the door and stepped inside. As the driver pulled away into the stream of traffic, I looked back through the rear window. Damian was still standing in the rain, watching the car go. He didn't run after it. He didn't shout. He just stood there with his head high, the rain washing away the soot of the past, waiting patiently for the day I would decide to open the door again. I leaned back against the seat, pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the browser. The screen was bright, clean, and entirely empty. I closed my eyes and smiled, ready for the morning.